Under the vast canopy of stars, a small town sat quietly on the edge of a dense forest, its streets empty and peaceful under the light of a waxing moon. Lucas, a curious boy with messy brown hair and bright, eager eyes, often found himself wandering far from his home, deep into the woods. It was in these woods that he found something, or rather, someone that would change his life forever. It was a warm summer night when he first saw the strange light flicker across the sky. He had been lying on his back, his hands behind his head, staring up at the stars, when a bright flash streaked through the darkness, followed by a sudden thud from the forest beyond. At first, he thought it was nothing more than his imagination running wild, but the sound was too real, too close to ignore. His heart began to race with excitement and curiosity as he stood up, dusting the dirt off his jeans, and sprinted toward the source of the noise. As he pushed through the thick underbrush, Lucas stumbled upon a small clearing. There, to his amazement, was a spacecraft shaped like a silver disk, with shimmering lights blinking faintly from its surface. It had crashed, leaving a trail of scorched earth behind it. But what really caught Lucas's attention wasn't the ship itself, it was the figure standing next to it. A girl, no older than him, was sitting on the ground, her legs crossed in front of her, staring at him with wide, curious eyes. She had pale blue skin that seemed to glow in the moonlight, and her long, silvery hair flowed behind her like a cascade of liquid light. Her clothes were unlike anything Lucas had ever seen, sleek. "Are you okay?" Lucas asked hesitantly, his voice quivering a little. The girl blinked, as if startled, and then slowly stood up. Her movements were graceful, almost otherworldly, and Lucas couldn't help but watch her in awe. "I'm fine," she replied in a soft, melodic voice. It sounded like music, but somehow also strange, as if she wasn't speaking his language at all. Yet, he understood her completely, as if her words were somehow reaching deep into his mind. "My ship. It has malfunctioned," she said, gesturing toward the spacecraft. "I am stranded here." Lucas felt a rush of sympathy for her. She didn't seem afraid, though. She was calm, collected, as if this was all normal for her. "Where are you from?" he asked, his curiosity bubbling over. The girl's eyes sparkled as she tilted her head, considering his question. "I am from a place far beyond your stars," she said cryptically. "I am called Lyra." Lyra, the name was simple but elegant. It felt right somehow. "You're from space?" Lucas whispered in awe. Lyra nodded, and her gaze turned toward the sky, her expression growing distant. "I must repair my ship and return to my world," she said softly, almost to herself. "But it may take time. And I have never been to a place like this before. It is beautiful, though." "Your Earth." Lucas couldn't believe what he was hearing. She was from another world, and somehow she had ended up here, in his little town. He had seen movies about aliens, heard stories from older kids, but nothing could prepare him for the reality of it all. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but the words seemed to stick in his throat. "I'll help you," he blurted out suddenly, surprising even himself. Lyra looked back at him, her eyes searching his face as if weighing his sincerity. "You would?" she asked, her voice soft, and Lucas nodded vigorously. He had no idea how he could help, but something inside him, something deep and unexplainable, urged him to offer his assistance. "I'll do whatever I can. I'll bring tools, anything you need." Lyra smiled, and for a moment the world seemed to slow down. There was something about her smile that was both comforting and otherworldly, like a promise that everything would be okay. She reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder, a gentle touch that made Lucas's heart skip a beat. "Thank you, Lucas," she said, speaking his name with a soft warmth that made him feel like he mattered. "You are kind." And just like that, Lucas felt a strange connection to this girl from another world, one he couldn't explain. They spent hours together in that small clearing, talking about everything and nothing. She told him about her home, about planets that glowed with colors he couldn't imagine, about star systems where the very fabric of time bent in ways that defied logic. Lucas listened, captivated by her stories, his imagination running wild with possibilities. But there was one thing he hadn't told her, One thing that had been brewing in his heart ever since he laid eyes on her. As the night deepened and the stars shimmered above them, Lucas turned to her with a sudden seriousness. "When you fix your ship and leave, will you come back?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra looked at him, her eyes soft but unreadable. "I will return, Lucas," she said after a long pause. "But you must promise me something. When I come back, you must be here. Promise me that." Lucas's heart raced. He didn't fully understand what she meant, but in that moment, a powerful feeling surged through him. He had made a decision, one he couldn't take back. "I promise," he said, his voice firm with conviction. "When you come back, I'll be here. And when you do, I'll be waiting for you." Lyra's eyes twinkled with something that looked like amusement, but there was a warmth there too, a strange tenderness. "Thank you, Lucas. You are a brave soul." As she turned toward her ship, preparing to make the repairs, Lucas sat there for a long while, staring up at the sky. The stars seemed closer that night, as if they too were listening to the promise he had made. He didn't know when or how, but deep down, he felt something in the air, something that told him that his life and the world would never be the same again. And so, with the promise hanging between them like a thread of fate, Lucas waited, not knowing how much that promise would shape his future or the future of Earth itself. The night grew darker, but for Lucas, it was the beginning of something that would change everything. Years passed since Lucas had last seen Lyra. The memory of that strange night, where he had promised to wait for her return, had slowly faded into the distant corners of his mind. He had grown up, and life had carried him along in its usual rhythm. He moved from childhood into his teenage years, then into adulthood, his days filled with the simple yet demanding routine of school, work, and social life. But every now and then, in the quiet moments when he would look up at the stars, the memory of that promise would stir within him, like a faint echo he couldn't ignore. He had often wondered what had become of Lyra. Had she ever made it back to her planet? Did she still remember the promise he made? But the years wore on, and he assumed that it was just a childhood fantasy, a story he told himself during lonely nights spent staring at the sky. Then, on one cool evening, everything changed. Lucas was walking home after a long day at work, his mind preoccupied with the usual worries. His job at a small tech company had been draining lately, and he was tired of the endless cycle of meetings and deadlines. It was around dusk, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and purple, when he felt something strange in the air. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and he instinctively glanced toward the sky. For a moment, everything seemed normal. The usual planes were flying overhead, and the stars had yet to make their appearance. But then, in a flash that split the evening like a thunderclap, a sudden streak of light cut across the sky, brighter than any star Lucas had ever seen. His heart raced, and his breath caught in his throat. He knew, deep down, that this was no ordinary phenomenon. It was happening again. She was coming back. Lucas stood frozen, staring at the streak of light as it grew larger and larger, until it suddenly vanished behind the tree line, out of sight. His pulse quickened, his legs almost unwilling to move, but his feet carried him forward, heading toward the forest, the same place where everything had started so many years ago. The walk felt longer than it should have. His mind was spinning with questions, memories, and the rush of disbelief. Could it really be her? Could Lyra truly be returning after all this time? He barely allowed himself to think about it, afraid that if he did, he might convince himself it was just a dream, or worse, a trick his mind had played on him. The trees in the forest seemed darker than usual, their shadows stretching across the path as if to shield whatever was coming from the world. The air was thick with tension, and the once familiar surroundings felt strange, almost alien. As he neared the clearing, Lucas's heart began to race even faster. There, in the same spot where the ship had landed all those years ago, stood a figure. A tall, elegant silhouette bathed in the eerie light of a craft descending slowly from the sky. Lucas's breath caught in his throat. It was her. Lyra. She was no longer the young girl he'd met as a child. Her form was taller, her posture more commanding, and her presence seemed to fill the clearing in a way that made it hard to look away. Her silver hair glistened in the dimming light, and her skin, still the same glowing, pale blue, was radiant against the darkness. But it wasn't just her appearance that took Lucas's breath away. It was the aura of strength and purpose that surrounded her, as if she had become something far greater than the girl he once knew. Lyra's eyes met his, and for a moment there was no recognition in them. She studied him, as though unsure of who this man was standing before her. Then her gaze softened, and a faint smile tugged at her lips. "Lucas," she said, her voice rich and melodic, just as he remembered. But there was something different in her tone now, something deeper, heavier. "I have returned." Lucas could hardly believe it. He stood there motionless as his mind tried to catch up with the reality before him. You're really here." "You came back," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Lyra nodded, her expression unreadable. "I did. And I need your help, Lucas. More than you can imagine." The weight of her words hit him like a wave. "My help?" he echoed, still struggling to comprehend the situation. "What do you mean?" Lyra took a step forward, her eyes flickering with an emotion Lucas couldn't quite place. "My people, we are in danger. My planet is under threat, and the galaxy itself is on the brink of war. We have few allies left, and I came back because of you, because of the promise you made." Lucas felt a strange chill run through him, and his heart skipped a beat. The promise. It all came rushing back, the little boy who had made a simple vow under the stars. He had forgotten the weight of those words until this very moment. And now, they were coming to life in a way he couldn't have imagined. "Why me?" Lucas asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "I'm just a guy from Earth. What could I possibly do to help you?" Lyra's gaze softened. "You are more than you think. Humans have something no other species has, something invaluable. You have the will to fight, to survive against impossible odds. It is what sets you apart from everyone else in the galaxy. It is why I came to you." Lucas swallowed hard, the gravity of the situation starting to sink in. He looked at Lyra, her face more serious than he had ever seen, and felt something shift inside him. The childhood promise he had made suddenly felt like a call to action. This was no longer a simple vow between two friends. This was the beginning of something far larger, something that could change the fate of not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. "Tell me what I need to do," Lucas said, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling in his chest. Lyra nodded, her expression determined. "You will help me unite Earth's leaders, prepare them for what is coming, and together, we will fight back against the enemies who threaten us all." And just like that, Lucas knew his life would never be the same again. The promise he had made so long ago was no longer a childhood fantasy. It was real, and it was about to take him to places he never thought possible. Lucas could hardly believe what was happening. It had only been a few days since Lyra's return, and already the weight of her request had shifted everything in his life. He was no longer just a regular guy living an ordinary life. Now, he was part of something far bigger. There was a war coming, a war that threatened to consume Earth, and he had promised to help Lyra unite humanity to stand against it. It felt impossible. How could a single man, someone who had never led a nation or commanded an army, make a difference in a situation this vast? The idea of gathering Earth's leaders, convincing them to trust an alien like Lyra and prepare for an intergalactic war, seemed like a monumental task. But there was no time to second-guess himself. The galaxy was in chaos, and humanity's future depended on their unity. Lucas and Lyra began their journey by reaching out to the world's most influential leaders, but things didn't go as smoothly as they had hoped. Despite the overwhelming evidence of alien life and the clear threat of a galactic war, the world was reluctant to believe it. Governments, each with their own priorities and interests, were slow to act. Some of the more powerful nations dismissed the idea outright, calling it a hoax, while others feared that Lyra's presence was part of some greater, hidden agenda. Lucas had underestimated the resistance he would face not just from world leaders, but from ordinary people too. Fear of the unknown was powerful, and the thought of an alien species bringing war to their doorstep sent ripples of panic through every corner of society. The first summit they attended was in Geneva, where the world's most powerful nations had gathered. Lyra stood beside Lucas in the cold, sterile conference room, her alien beauty impossible to ignore. She looked calm, even regal, but Lucas could feel the tension radiating from her. They were up against more than just political skepticism. They were up against the fear of the unknown, a fear that could undo everything they were trying to accomplish. The leaders of the nations around the table were mostly indifferent to the idea of an intergalactic conflict. They wanted proof, something solid that would justify the sacrifices Lyra was asking them to make. And so, Lyra began to speak. Her voice, soft yet firm, carried an air of authority that caught the attention of even the most cynical delegates. "I understand your skepticism," she began, her words sharp but measured. "But what I am asking you is not to trust me, but to trust what you already know. The Arkan Dominion, an empire that has conquered countless worlds, is coming for Earth. They will destroy everything you hold dear if you do not act now." Her words hit the room like a shockwave. Some leaders were already shaking their heads, disbelieving, while others whispered urgently among themselves. Lucas could feel the tension rise, but Lyra's composure never faltered. She went on to explain the Dominion's ruthless tactics, their unyielding desire to expand their power, and how humanity was the key to stopping them. She spoke of the Dominion's previous invasions of peaceful planets, how entire civilizations had been crushed under their might. Yet, she also spoke of hope. "Humans have something the Dominion does not," she said. "You have ingenuity, unity, and an unbreakable will to survive. Together, you have the strength to fight back." There was a long silence after her speech. Some leaders, still unconvinced, demanded more evidence, while others simply dismissed the warning as an exaggeration. Lucas felt his heart sink. He knew they couldn't afford to waste time. The stakes were too high. And yet, it was clear that they were losing the battle before it had even begun. Frustrated, Lucas stood up, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The room quieted, all eyes turning to him. He hadn't planned to speak, but something inside him snapped. "Listen," he said, his voice shaking with urgency. "I'm just a guy from Earth, but I've seen what this woman has done. I've seen her fight for her people. She's not asking for anything selfish. She's here because she believes in us. I believe in us. If we don't act now, it won't just be an alien invasion, it'll be the end of everything we know. We have a choice. We can either fight together, or we can watch the galaxy tear us apart." His words hung in the air, and for the first time, the room fell completely silent. Lucas wasn't a leader, but something about his simple, heartfelt plea cut through the fear and uncertainty. Slowly, one by one, the leaders began to murmur among themselves. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and for the first time, they were considering the possibility that Lyra's story might be true. It wasn't an easy victory. Convincing world leaders to join forces was only the first hurdle. Once the alliances were in place, Lucas and Lyra faced an even greater challenge convincing Earth's military forces to work together. The global defense systems were divided, each country maintaining its own weapons, troops, and strategies. The idea of combining forces into a single unified military seemed like an impossible dream, but Lucas had seen the way people rallied together during moments of crisis. He had seen it when his town came together after a natural disaster, when communities united after acts of terrorism. Humans had a unique ability to come together in the face of danger. He just needed to ignite that spark. Lyra worked tirelessly, speaking with military leaders, showing them the technology and strategies that had allowed her people to survive against the Dominion's forces. But even that wasn't enough. The fear of losing control, the fear of being dependent on someone else, kept many leaders and generals from fully committing to the alliance. Lucas had seen this all his life, the politics of fear. But he also saw something else. The glimmer of hope in people's eyes when they realized the truth. The more they heard, the more they saw the need to act. Slowly, they began to change their minds. And then, it happened. One by one, the leaders of the world agreed to form a unified front. The Earth Defense Alliance was born. The moment the last agreement was signed, Lucas stood on the balcony of the command center, looking out at the busy streets below. The city was alive with activity, the people unaware of how close they had come to disaster. But the war was not over. It was just beginning. Lyra joined him on the balcony, her presence as calm and unwavering as ever. "We've done it," Lucas said quietly, though doubt still lingered in his voice. "But we still don't know if we'll be ready in time." Lyra turned to him, her eyes meeting his with quiet determination. "We will be," she said softly. "Humanity has never backed down from a fight. I have seen it in you. You have more strength than you know." As the stars began to appear in the night sky, Lucas felt something stir inside him, a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging to something much bigger than himself. The war was coming, but so was their chance to prove that humanity's greatest strength was not in its technology or its armies, but in its unity, its will to survive, and its heart. And together, they would fight. The war had come. No one had expected it to happen so quickly. Yet when the Arkan Dominion's massive fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system, there was no mistaking it. The invasion was upon them. Lucas stood in the command center, the once familiar faces of the Earth Defense Alliance now looking grim and tired. They had prepared for this moment for months, but nothing could have prepared them for the sheer scale of the invasion. The Dominion was unlike anything Earth had ever faced. Their ships were massive, gleaming metal beasts that seemed to swallow the stars themselves. They moved through space with terrifying precision, their weapons capable of devastating entire cities in a single strike. Lyra had warned them about the Dominion's ruthless tactics, but seeing it firsthand was a different experience altogether. The skies above Earth had been alive with activity, as fleets of Earth's ships, now united under a single banner, scrambled to form a defense. Lucas had spent countless nights working with the military leaders, strategizing, organizing, and trying to build a defense system strong enough to stand up to the Dominion's might. But the truth was undeniable. They were outmatched. The Dominion had vast resources, and their technology was far superior. Earth's fleet, though powerful, was still a fraction of the strength the Dominion could muster, the front lines of the battle. Lucas found himself thrust into a position he never expected. He'd been training for months, learning military strategy and understanding how to work within Earth's defense systems, but being in the heat of battle was something entirely different. His heart raced as the massive warships of the Dominion loomed larger and larger on the radar. The battle had begun. Lyra was everywhere. Despite the overwhelming odds, she had become a symbol of hope for humanity. Her calm, composed presence among the chaos of war was a beacon that drew people to her cause. She moved with purpose, coordinating the defenses from the Earth space station, using her advanced knowledge of intergalactic warfare to give humanity a fighting chance. Her people's technology had given Earth ships a much-needed edge, but the Dominion was relentless. Their attacks came without warning, swift and deadly, their ships firing laser beams that could cut through the strongest armor like it was paper. The first major battle took place just outside the orbit of Mars. Earth's fleet gathered in a formation that stretched for miles, their ships lined up like a jagged line of defense against the incoming Dominion forces. Lucas was on one of the smaller ships, barely more than a speck in the vastness of space. His hands gripped the controls as his heart beat in his chest, each second feeling like an eternity. The tension was unbearable. He was part of a team, but it didn't feel like it. His ship felt too small, too vulnerable, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to witness the end of everything. The first wave of Dominion ships appeared on the horizon, their forms like dark shadows against the stars. The silence before the battle was deafening, and then, without warning, the Dominion opened fire. Explosions lit up the darkness of space as beams of energy shot across the sky, tearing through the Earth's fleet. The ship next to Lucas exploded in a violent burst, sending debris scattering in all directions. The shockwave hit them moments later, rattling the entire ship. "We're taking heavy fire," the comms officer shouted. "We need to return fire, now." Lucas gritted his teeth, forcing himself to focus. His hands moved quickly across the controls, firing back with everything they had. The battle was chaos, a cacophony of explosions, laser fire, and the shrill alarms blaring in their ears. It was hard to think, hard to process anything with the deafening noise of the battle surrounding them, but Lucas knew that there was no room for hesitation. This was it. The fate of Earth was in their hands. As the battle raged on, Lyra's voice crackled through the comms, calm and steady as always. Focus fire on their command ships. They are the key to their tactics. If we destroy their leadership, the rest of their fleet will fall into disarray. Lucas nodded, though no one could see him. He knew what they had to do. The command ships were the heart of the Dominion's fleet. Destroying them would disrupt their coordination, giving Earth's forces a chance to regroup and fight back. The strategy was clear, but carrying it out would take everything they had. For hours, the battle continued, each moment feeling like the end could come at any second. But Earth's forces, though outnumbered, were resilient. Lucas saw it in the faces of the men and women fighting beside him. They weren't giving up, even when it seemed like the odds were stacked against them. Lyra's leadership was the glue holding them all together. She was everywhere guiding Earth's fleet, issuing orders, and providing hope when it seemed like there was none. But even with their best efforts, the Dominion fleet was overwhelming. Lucas's ship took a direct hit. Alarms screamed as the ship's systems began to fail. The lights flickered, and Lucas was thrown from his seat, his head slamming against the control panel. Dazed, he struggled to regain his senses, reaching for the comm system. "Lyra!" he shouted into the microphone, his voice shaky. "We're losing power. We need backup." There was a moment of silence before Lyra's calm voice responded. "Hold on, Lucas. We're coming." Just as all hope seemed lost, a streak of light shot across the sky, and a new fleet arrived. The reinforcements had come, human and alien ships, united in the cause. They tore into the Dominion's forces with the fury of 1,000 storms. The battle shifted. Earth's forces, bolstered by Lyra's people, began to push back against the Dominion. The tide was turning. But even as the Dominion ships faltered, Lucas knew this was far from over. The battle had been long, but the war was just beginning. There would be more fights, more losses, and more sacrifices. As he watched the destruction unfold, he realized something. The fight was no longer just about defending Earth. It was about defending all life, human, alien, and every species that had been caught in the Dominion's wake. Lyra's voice came through again, softer now but filled with conviction. "This is only the beginning, Lucas. But together, we will win this." For the first time since the battle began, Lucas felt a spark of hope deep within him. The fight was far from over, but Earth had something that the Dominion didn't: unity, resilience, and an unbreakable will. As the war raged on, Lucas and Lyra knew that their alliance had only just begun to show its true power. The real test was yet to come. But for now, they had a victory to hold on to, and that would be enough to keep pushing forward. The war was over. The skies that had once burned with the fires of battle were now calm, the darkness of space finally free from the haunting presence of the Dominion. Earth had emerged victorious, but the cost had been immense. Cities had been destroyed, lives had been lost, and the scars of the conflict would remain for generations. Yet, despite the destruction, there was a sense of hope in the air, a sense of a new beginning. The victory was not just Earth's. It was the galaxy's. And it was because of the courage and unity of humans, aliens, and the unbreakable bond that had formed between them. Lucas stood on the balcony of the Earth Defense Command, looking out over the sprawling city below. The sun was rising, casting a warm golden glow over the world, a stark contrast to the bleakness of the past months. It was a new dawn, not just for Earth, but for the entire galaxy. The war had taught them a harsh lesson, that strength didn't come from weapons alone, but from unity, from working together despite their differences. And now, with the Dominion's defeat, they had the chance to rebuild, to create something better. Beside him stood Lyra, her expression serene as she watched the same sunrise. Her once silver-blue skin now seemed even brighter, reflecting the sunlight in a way that made her look almost ethereal. She had been a guiding force throughout the war. Her leadership and wisdom had been the anchor that held them all together when things seemed darkest. Lucas couldn't help but admire her. In the chaos of the war, she had remained a constant, her unwavering resolve, a beacon for humanity and the other races who had joined their fight. "You're quiet," Lyra said, her voice soft yet full of meaning. I thought you'd be celebrating with the others. Lucas smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. I'm not sure what to celebrate. The war is over, but everything has changed. We've won, yes. But the world is different now. The people are different. The galaxy is different. Lyra turned her gaze to him, her eyes reflecting the same quiet strength that had carried them through the darkest hours. Change is inevitable, Lucas. We can either embrace it and build something better, or we can let it consume us. The choice is always ours. Lucas looked out at the horizon, his mind racing. The Dominion's defeat had been a victory, but it was also the beginning of a new era, one filled with uncertainty and unknown challenges. Earth had become a central hub in the galaxy, with new alliances being formed and new responsibilities falling on their shoulders. The war had proven humanity's resilience, but it had also opened their eyes to a much larger world beyond their own. The days of isolation were over. Earth was now part of something much bigger, an intergalactic community, one that could no longer ignore the threats and opportunities beyond their stars. It feels like we're standing at the edge of something, Lucas said quietly. Like we're at the beginning of a journey that none of us can fully understand yet. Lyra nodded, her expression thoughtful. You're right. There is still much to be done. The Dominion may be gone, but other threats exist. And there are many unknowns in the galaxy, races and forces we've never encountered. But we now have something we didn't have before. Unity. The ability to stand together no matter the cost. Their conversation was interrupted as a soft beep came from the communicator in Lyra's hand. She glanced at the screen and then turned to Lucas. The Council is waiting for us, she said, her tone serious. It's time to start rebuilding. Lucas followed her into the command center, where leaders from across Earth and the galaxy had gathered. It was a place that had once been filled with tension, arguments, and heated debates. But today, there was a quiet sense of purpose in the room. They had all been through hell, but now they stood on the other side alive, together, ready to move forward. The Earth Defense Alliance, once a group of scattered nations and forces, was now a unified force, and it was tasked with ensuring the future of Earth and its new allies. The council meeting began with a moment of silence for those who had fallen. Then, one by one, the leaders spoke of the future. They discussed the rebuilding process, the sharing of technology, and the establishment of new trade routes. They spoke of peacekeeping efforts, of creating a galaxy that would be united against future threats. Lucas listened, his mind still racing. This was the start of something monumental, something beyond his wildest dreams. When it was his turn to speak, Lucas stood up, his hands slightly shaking. He had never thought of himself as a leader, but the events of the past months had changed him. He had learned that leadership wasn't about commanding armies or making grand speeches, it was about making tough decisions, standing by those decisions, and inspiring others to believe in a common cause. We've won, he began, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. But winning isn't enough. What we do with this victory is what matters. We have the chance to build a new world, one where Earth is no longer isolated, one where we can work together with our allies and protect our people. But that won't happen if we fall back into old habits. We must continue to build trust, to grow together, and to ensure that the mistakes of the past never repeat. The room was silent for a moment, and then, as if on cue, the leaders nodded in agreement. There was a shared understanding in the air, a recognition that the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was one they had to walk together. As the meeting continued, Lucas's mind wandered back to the battlefield, to the countless lives lost, to the moments when he thought everything was going to fall apart. But now, standing in this room, surrounded by people who had fought for the same cause, he realized how far they had come. Earth had not only survived, it had thrived. It had become part of something greater than itself, a force for peace in a galaxy that had once seemed so far away. Outside the command center, the sun had risen higher, casting its golden light over the world. The dawn of a new era had arrived. And as Lucas looked out at the horizon, he felt a surge of hope. The future was uncertain, yes, but for the first time in a long while, he believed they could face it together. With Lyra by his side and the support of all the races that had stood with Earth, they would build a new future. a future where the stars were not a symbol of fear, but of hope. And so, a new chapter began. The war was over, but the journey was just beginning.